Have you ever met someone who acted like they owned a whole street just because they lived there the longest? Welcome to Willow Creek Lane. Quiet, clean, and controlled. The kind of neighborhood where mailboxes match, lawns are trimmed to city code, and whispers travel faster than news apps. At least that's how June Caldwell liked it. June was 58, widowed, retired, and in her own mind, she was the spine that held Willow Creek upright. Her porch was her throne, her binoculars the scepter, her routine sacred. Every morning, coffee, crossword, scan. She knew the schedule of trash pickup, the habits of every dog walker, even the quirks of the mailman. So when something new arrived, something unfamiliar, she noticed, it was a Saturday. Sticky heat clung to everything. June had just finished her hydrangeas when she caught the movement across the street. There, lounging beside the backyard pool of the old Henderson house, was a woman, a black woman, mid-40s, alone. She wore a deep blue swimsuit, sunglasses too large to be modest, and carried herself with the quiet grace of someone utterly unbothered. A paperback novel rested on her abdomen, iced tea within arm's reach. Jazz played faintly from somewhere. June blinked. She hadn't seen a moving truck, hadn't heard any introductions, no potluck invite, and yet here she was, laying out in the sun like she owned the place. Her lips tightened. She peered through the blinds and reached for her phone. Not 911. She wasn't that type of neighbor, just the local, non-emergency line. "Hi, yes," she began sweetly. "I'm calling about a possible trespasser over on Willow Creek Lane, at the old Henderson property." She hesitated as if the words hurt to say. "She's mid-40s, African-American, I think. She's in the backyard near the pool. Doesn't seem to be causing trouble, but she's just there," the dispatcher asked. "Any signs of forced entry?" "Number. But I don't know if she belongs there. I haven't seen anyone move in. The gate could have been open." A pause. "Thank you, ma'am. Officers will check it out." June smiled, thanked them, and hung up. Back to her post. Back to watching. Back to waiting for proof that she was still the keeper of order on Willow Creek Lane. The patrol car rolled slowly down Willow Creek Lane. June leaned forward in her seat like a child waiting for a parade float. Her hands were clasped, knuckles white. The officers stepped out, one tall, sunburned, clearly seasoned, the other younger, shifting nervously like a rookie on his second week. They didn't even knock on her door, just walked straight to the open side gate of the old Henderson property. And on the other side of that fence, Ava Sinclair. She had heard the gate click, but she didn't flinch. She reached calmly for her sunglasses, placed them on the table, and looked up with the poise of someone who'd faced far worse than two suburban cops on a hot afternoon. "Afternoon, officers," she said, voice calm as glass. "Ma'am, we received a call about a possible trespassing report," the older officer said, already a bit hesitant. "Could we ask if you live here?" Ava blinked slowly. "You want to see ID? If you don't mind." She stood, brushed off her towel with a grace that made even the officers hesitate, and walked to a small cabinet on the patio. She opened a drawer and pulled out a slim leather wallet. Click, flip. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Deputy Director Ava Sinclair. Both officers froze. She didn't wait for them to speak. "I moved in here last Friday. I've been in D.C. the past few days preparing testimony for the Senate Intelligence Committee. Today is the first afternoon I've had to sit still." The younger officer tried not to visibly shrink. The older one cleared his throat. "We didn't know, ma'am. The report was vague." Ava smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Did the report mention anything being stolen? Damaged? Any signs of forced entry?" "No, ma'am. Just a black woman, near a pool." The taller officer rubbed his neck. "We're sorry for the inconvenience. We'll close this out." She nodded once. "Next time, tell the caller not to confuse silence for suspicion." And with that, she sat back down, picked up her book, and turned the page like nothing had happened. The picture showed up by dusk, blurry, taken through a gap in the fence. Two officers, a woman in a navy swimsuit, a wallet in her hand, but it was the caption that set it all off. "That moment when your neighbor calls the cops on the new FBI deputy director." Within hours, the photo had over 700 shares in local Facebook groups. By morning, it was on Twitter. Someone found Ava's LinkedIn. Someone else linked to a recent clip of her testifying before Congress on domestic threats. Then came the Reddit threads, TikToks, memes, and Willow Creek Lane? It was no longer a quiet suburb. It was the suburb everyone was talking about. June sat frozen at her kitchen table, phone in one hand, coffee in the other. She watched the shares climb, the comments explode. This is why we say systemic racism still exists. Imagine being so entitled you call the cops on an FBI agent. Karen thought she caught a criminal, but all she caught was a national dragging. Her inbox flooded. Carol from down the block sent a text. "Tell me this isn't about you." Margie, who she hadn't spoken to since last Easter, emailed a link with just one word. "June." She didn't reply. What could she say? And when she opened her front door later that day to get the mail, she realized something terrifying. No one looked her in the eye. The neighborhood was shifting, not physically, but socially. June Caldwell was no longer the queen of the sidewalk. She was the ghost people looked past. What June didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Ava Sinclair had grown up in neighborhoods like this one, where silence was considered polite and suspicion was considered protection. She'd seen her mother questioned by security for walking too slowly through a bookstore, watched her older brother get pulled over just for driving the family's old Lexus through a better part of town. She had collected stories like that the way some kids collected stamps, neatly stored, sorted by rage, categorized by pain. And as she sat on her new porch, watching birds skim the fence line, Ava reflected on how easy it had been to fall back into that old dance. Because the truth was, she hadn't wanted to move here. She'd taken the position in Texas as a temporary assignment. She planned to keep a low profile, blend in. Clearly that plan had evaporated with one phone call. But she wasn't angry. No, anger burned too hot, too fast. This wasn't that. This was something colder, sadder, more enduring. Disappointment, because she had wanted, just once, to be the quiet neighbor. The woman who kept to herself. The face in the window no one noticed. And instead, she was a headline. So when the police left, Ava didn't call her friends or her supervisor. She didn't post a statement. She poured another glass of tea, picked up her book, and watched the shadows lengthen across the backyard she now undeniably owned. June hadn't moved from her kitchen table in hours. The TV was on, but muted. Her phone vibrated every few minutes. Messages from people she barely remembered, all suddenly interested in her corner of the world. She glanced out the window. Ava was on her porch now, casually sipping her tea. No police, no anger, just presence. And June hated how composed she looked. June prided herself on always being on top of things. But now the entire neighborhood had slipped through her fingers. The world was laughing at her, and she couldn't even defend herself, because everything they were saying was true. She had made a judgment. She had called the police, and the woman she targeted was more qualified, more powerful, and more respected than almost anyone else in town. She tried to find excuses. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe it was the heat. Maybe she just didn't like strangers. Maybe, the truth clawed at her. She didn't think someone like Ava could live on Willow Creek. Not without permission, not without checking in, not without making herself small. And that truth was uglier than anything the internet could say. Tuesday morning, 8:42 a.m. June was still in her robe when the knock came. It wasn't Ava. It was Officer Ortega. The same man who had questioned Ava days before now stood calmly at June's front step. "Good morning, Ms. Caldwell," he said, removing his cap. June swallowed. "Morning." "I just wanted to follow up on the call from Saturday," he said, tone neutral but firm. "It's standard, especially after the level of attention the situation's gotten." She nodded. "I understand." He took out a notepad but didn't write anything yet. "Ms. Caldwell, I want to explain something," he said. "Every call we receive is logged, and while we do respond, we also track the intent and impact of those calls. If we start seeing a pattern, especially involving the same caller and complaints about people of a certain background, Those reports are reviewed more seriously. Her face went pale. Are you saying I'm being investigated? No, he said gently. But I'm saying this. If something like this happens again, and it shows bias without cause, it could be considered harassment, or worse. She blinked. But I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. Intent doesn't erase impact, he said, and we're asking people, especially in positions of community influence, to think carefully before dialing. He gave her a small nod. That's all I came to say. And then he walked away. June didn't close the door right away. She just stood there barefoot, with shame crawling up her neck like a second skin. Later that afternoon, a new email appeared in every inbox along Willow Creek. Subject, Let's Talk. Ava Sinclair. Neighbors, this weekend, I'd like to invite you to something small. Not a press event, not a formal dinner, just a backyard get-together with drinks, snacks, and no assumptions. If you're curious about who I am, I'll be there. If you'd rather not come, I understand. But we live here now, all of us. And the sidewalk doesn't belong to any one person. No judgment, no names, just openness. June read the email 5 times. And for the first time since the whole fiasco started, she didn't feel defensive. She felt seen, not praised, not forgiven, but acknowledged, as someone who had caused harm, but also someone who could show up and do better. At 4:30 that Saturday, she put on a clean blouse, carried a tray of lemon bars, walked slowly across the street. Ava stood by a folding table, arranging cups. She noticed June, nodded once, and gestured to an open seat. No fanfare, no words, just space, and June took it. The backyard was buzzing. Neighbors trickled in, some with nervous smiles, others with guarded curiosity. There were casseroles, pitchers of sweet tea, bowls of chips, and folding chairs arranged in loose circles. Ava moved through the crowd like water, steady, graceful, never forcing herself into conversations, but always making herself available. She asked about people's children, remembered one neighbor's hip surgery, complimented a dog's name. She wasn't trying to win anyone over. She was just real. And that, June thought, was more disarming than any speech could have been. June sat near the back. She didn't know if she'd speak. Part of her wanted to disappear into the lemon bars. But then Carol leaned toward her and whispered, I didn't know she was like this. She's impressive. June nodded but said nothing. Later, as the sun dipped low and the lantern lights blinked on, Ava stood up quietly and cleared her throat. The side yard fell silent. I wasn't sure whether I'd say anything tonight, Ava began, but I think I need to. She looked around. I know what happened last week made some people uncomfortable, some angry, some defensive, and for many of you, embarrassed. No one moved. I've spent most of my life walking into rooms where I didn't fit, where I had to prove, again and again, that I wasn't a threat, that I wasn't a problem to be solved. Ava paused. And I thought moving to Willow Creek, maybe I'd get a break from all that, just for a while. But the truth is, we carry our histories with us, and neighborhoods, like people, have shadows. A few people shifted in their seats. I don't need apologies, she continued. I don't need fanfare. I just need you to look closer. Ask one more question before jumping to one conclusion. That's it. She raised her glass. To being neighbors, not just in address, but in action. Everyone raised theirs too, even June. The following week, something subtle began to change. Neighbors started waving more. Ava's name came up in group chats, not as a cautionary tale, but as someone to ask about city council issues, or for advice on federal grant applications, or even just to grab coffee with. And June? She walked slower on her way to the mailbox, not out of shame anymore, but out of humility. One afternoon, Ava was pruning her roses when June stopped by. She didn't come with food or apology. She came with a question. Do you ever get tired of being the one who has to teach us? Ava didn't look up right away. Then she said, yes. June nodded. A beat passed. Then Ava added, but I've learned that staying silent costs more than speaking up, especially if I have the strength to carry both truth and patience in the same hand. June sat on the steps next to her. No words, no noise, just shared breath. For the first time since she'd made that phone call, June didn't feel like the villain in the story. She felt like someone trying to write a new one. Weeks passed. The viral post was no longer on the front page. The internet had moved on. But Willow Creek hadn't. Ava was nominated for the local advisory board. June offered to co-host a neighborhood watch retraining on unconscious bias. Carol joined a book club Ava started, featuring only authors who were women of color. Change wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, like roots shifting under soil. Then one Saturday, the doorbell rang at Ava's house. She opened the door to find June standing there, holding a thick envelope. "What's this?" Ava asked. "My story," June said softly. "I wrote it all down. Everything that led me to that phone call, and everything after." Ava took the envelope but didn't open it. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," June said quickly. "I just needed to finally tell the whole truth, even if I'm the only one who reads it." Ava met her eyes. "I'll read it, but only if you keep writing." June smiled. "I already started chapter 2. Final thought. So the next time you feel yourself reaching for judgment before understanding, ask yourself, are you protecting your neighborhood or just the comfort of your own bias? Because some people wear badges you can't see. Some carry power not on their chest, but in their silence. And the most dangerous assumption of all is thinking that you get to decide who belongs.